Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey joins me now. Welcome, Senator.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. So you've looked at this new agreement. Can you support it in its current form?
No, not in its current form, Paul. No, I think the problem is the net effect of it is it diminishes the opportunity for trade among the three countries. And the whole idea is, of course, to maximize the freedom to trade. It does that in a variety of ways that are problematic for me. One is an expiration date. I don't know why in the world you'd put an expiration date on a free trade agreement.
6 years, isn't this?
Well, it's 16, but
you review it after 6.
You review it after 6 with no assurance that it'll be extended at that point. I think that's a significant problem. I really don't like what amount to country-specific rules of origin with respect to autos and auto parts. The whole idea behind this is a continental-wide free trade zone, where you'd have continental rules of origin, I understand that, but not country-specific. They use a minimum wage as their proxy for achieving that. It's a bad idea, I think. They also virtually destroy the independent mechanism for adjudicating disputes between an investor and a government, right? The investor-state dispute settlement mechanism. We have had that in every single trade agreement but one. And it's really important because sometimes the host country does things to disadvantage an American investor, and they can do it in a lot of ways, and we don't always get a fair hearing in their courts.
Now, you suggested in our pages last week that in order to prevent this deal from going into the Democratic House and getting even worse, you would like to see the president get it passed in this lame duck session. Does that have any chance now?
It's looking like the clock is about run out on that because there is a 30-day delay between the time that the administration would submit the final text of the agreement, which they could do, they could have done by now, and the time we can actually vote on it. So I've been urging the administration, this is a free option. Send the agreement to us. Work with us meaning, and I'm thinking about the free trade Republicans.
Right.
It might be that Democrats would be offended by this expedited process. Maybe you lose Democrat support, but there are enough Republicans to pass this under TPA exclusively. It would have to move in a pro-trade direction, but you could get a huge victory for the president by the end of the year.
Well, you know, one of the reasons that Robert Lighthizer said they could get this through Democratic Congress is they'd have union support. I looked at United Auto Workers' statement on Friday, and it said, not adequate as currently exists. I looked at the environmental groups. Right. They're opposed to it. Right. Chuck Schumer issued a statement saying, well, we got to have climate change thing added to it. I mean, are we going to see this pass a Democratic House?
So I'm very skeptical about this, right? Under what scenario is this a high priority for Nancy Pelosi to pass Donald Trump's NAFTA 2.0? I don't see it. And by the way, we've seen this movie before, right, where a Republican president sends Speaker Pelosi a new free trade agreement, and what did she do? She just did nothing.
George W. Bush, Colombia,
Correct.
Peru, Panama,
Right.
and South Korea all kicked off until Republicans retook the House.
Yeah, and she was very open about it. It was like, well, we might use this for leverage on other things, but it was not important to her, and she never moved the legislation at all.
So how many members of the Republican Senate agree with you?
You know, I'm not sure what the number is, Paul. You never know that sort of thing. I can tell you that there were 12 of us that signed the letter urging the president to send the document to us so that we can at least have a chance to move it in the direction of freer trade and get this done this year. I believe it's safe to say there are more senators who are sympathetic with that approach and might have chosen not to sign the letter for a variety of reasons. But, you know, Republicans in the Senate are overwhelmingly pro-trade.
Right.
Overwhelmingly. And everybody understands that this has moved in an unfortunate direction. The question now is, does it go anywhere with Nancy Pelosi holding the House? And if so, how much worse?
All right, let's turn to another subject before you go, and that is this vote in the Senate this week to essentially open the Lee Sanders bill that would cut off American funding for the Saudis' war in Yemen. That's now going to go to the Senate next week for debate. Right. You voted against the administration's wishes to send this vote for debate. Right. Why?
Because I think we need to have a debate. I think the administration has really not handled the assassination of Khashoggi well at all. I do not share the view that the U.S. has to withdraw the very, very limited advice and training that we're providing the Saudis.
Which is targeting advice in part.
And there's no doubt in my mind, it has reduced civilian casualties. The war in Yemen is a horrific, horrific humanitarian crisis, no doubt about it. But it could have been worse. It could still be worse. And with the absence of U.S. involvement, both to better train the Saudis on being precise and avoiding civilian casualties, but also pressuring the Houthis to get to the table and to begin negotiating.
But this Lee Sanders bill would cut off funding.
So it would. Why? So I don't agree with the substance of that, but I do think we have to have a debate on the Senate floor and get this administration to acknowledge that we have to both defend and promote American interests and remind the world, including our allies, that there are certain values that we're going to hold and we're going to insist that other people recognize.
And you don't think the administration has upheld that balance?
I think they've not struck that balance at all. When the Crown Prince, the de facto head of state of Saudi Arabia, he has to accept ultimate responsibility for that assassination. Whether or not we have a smoking gun and can prove that he actually issued an order and a text that we can identify, look, that's not important. What's important is the assassins all reported to him. They were part of an organization that he controls. He has to accept responsibility. There has to be some accountability. And to instead suggest, well, they buy a lot of weapons from us, so, you know, we're going to say nothing about it, that's just wrong. And that does not further our interest in the long run either. So some of us felt like this is a tool that we have in the Senate to address this issue, get their attention, and hopefully get a better balance.
All right, Senator, we'll follow that debate. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.